Everyone, and welcome to Rethinking Employability, preparing young people for the future of work. Brought to you today by the Edge Foundation and Envision. We'll be telling you more about them as we chat during today's session. I've just got a couple of housekeeping notices for you. So this session is being recorded and will be available on the Edge website. You will also need your phone to join in on a poll a couple of polls we want to be doing during the session as well. So just if you could have your phone handy, that would be very useful as well. I'll explain more about that too as we go. And I can already see you wildly typing in the chat section. So feel free to continue discussions in there too. You know, pop your questions in there. Or anything you just want to say about what we're talking about. I will try to get as many answered as possible, but if not, I'll also make sure the team from Edge will be replying to some of those messages as well. So I'm Steph McGovern. I'm a business journalist by trade, now doing a show for Channel 4, a daytime chat show type thing, which I've just rushed from, hence why I've got a lot of makeup on. I apologise about that, because I know that's the thing about life now. Everyone's at home, aren't they, doing these Zooms at the moment. And here I am suddenly looking like I've put in way more effort than I probably needed to, but that's because it's telly face. But anyway, my big passion is about young people and exactly what we're talking about today, about preparing them for the world of work. I am lucky enough to have had and been at a school where we very much were prepared for the world of work. It was a school which, even though it was in a tough area in Middlesbrough, it was one that had lots of links to employers. And I think the only reason I have done as well as I've done is because of that. And, you know, some of my peers, people I grew up with, even though they're a lot of them from really tough backgrounds, have gone on to do really well for themselves. And I think that is all about the foundation of our education at the beginning, which was about understanding what we needed to do in order to get a job. So I am delighted to be hosting this event for you. There's a couple of other people I want to introduce you to as well before I bring up our panelists. So first of all, we've got Eleanor Beer, who is a live illustrator joining us from near Cardiff, I believe, who's going to be listening to what we're talking about and then turning it into a kind of visual, I like to say visual minutes of the session. Do you want to give us a wave, Eleanor, there? And you might have to say something as well in order for you to light up, as it were.
Yeah, hi Steph. Hi everybody. Great to be here today. Yeah, as you've said perfectly, they are visual minutes, and I'm going to be drawing things live with my digital pen and then creating a visual summary of this meeting, so you'll be able to see that later.
Yeah, looking forward to that. I always think they're amazing what you come up with when it comes to visualising what we've been talking about. Let me introduce you to another Eleanor, who we're going to call Elle today for the purposes of having a double Ellen off. We're going to have Elle Wilson, who is Edge's policy manager, who's going to be gathering audiences' views, and Elle's going to explain as well a bit about the polls. Do you want to say a quick hello too?
Yeah, great. Thanks, Steph. Delighted to be upgraded to Tech Guru today. And yes, we'll be doing some online polling with you all later. So looking forward to doing that with you all.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. So we're going to start with a bit of a panel session, and particularly looking at what employers are looking for and how that is changing, because we all know the world of work is changing. So we want to just talk about what it is that employers are looking for from their future staff. So to do that, we have got an esteemed panel for you. We've got Ollie Newton, who's Executive Director of the Edge Foundation. We've got Neil Weller, MBE, former partner at Treat Bywaters and Anders as well. Big into apprenticeships, I know, so it'd be great to hear Neil's thoughts on that. Kirsty Green-Mann, who's Head of Corporate Responsibility at Burgess Salmon LLP, obviously a major legal firm. Joe Clark as well, Head of Programmes and Impact at Envision, who work with kids on projects around social enterprise. Mark Smith as well, CEO and co-founder of ADA, the National College for Digital Skills, so a key training provider as well. So welcome to all of you. Let me kick things off first of all. I mean, I kind of opened with a big statement of what are employers looking for in terms of employees in the future. Ollie, do you want to just kick us off on that?
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much, Steph, for kicking us off. So one of the things we've been doing at Edge over the last few years is really trying to digest and understand all of the research that's out there about the way that the economy is changing, the changing labour market. We hear a lot about the fourth industrial revolution. There's certainly no shortage of evidence and research out there. And we've been trying to bring it together into a bit more of a tangible kind of way of digesting it. I think that there are some scary stats out there. So the cost of skills shortages in the economy at the moment is over £6 billion to industry. And obviously that's a big figure, but actually what that means is, in a social level, is jobs that are going unfilled, possible expansion of companies that can't happen because those firms can't find the skills that they're looking for. Now, when we look at what employers are looking for, it's overwhelmingly the case that they're looking for that blend of academic and technical qualifications. It's not just those exam certificates. It's very much that broad mixture of skills. Think about the colleagues that you value working with. It's those people with lots of different skills. It's people like Elle who are able to step in from policy to then work our interactive polling today. When LinkedIn talked to business leaders around the world, they said that 92% of the employers they spoke to said that they valued what has in the past maybe been called soft skills, but we might want to call today employability skills, or or 21st century skills, or the skills people really need. They were top of their list. So things like creativity, problem solving, team working, communications.
Yeah, it does my head in that they're called soft skills, because I don't think any of us could do our jobs if we didn't have those skills. You know, we all know how crucial it is to be able to communicate, or, you know, empathy or understanding, all of these different things, teamwork, it's key. Neil, I know in your role, you know, worked with a lot of young people and apprenticeships, bringing them through. What is it you think that employers are looking for?
I think resilience is quite important in terms of young people. I mean, the last year, if there's one thing I think our young apprentices have shown us, that no matter what we've thrown at them, none of them have been put on furlough, none of them have been stood down. They've worked throughout the whole of the pandemic. And I think if there's one lesson that we've learned as an employer, is actually our young people have helped us take the business through this really difficult time. So I think the important thing is that when a young person starts, that they're there to be moulded, actually, and I think they learn so much in the workplace. We're just looking for a good grounding. We'll do the rest. We'll bring them on, and we can, if their communication skills aren't as good, we'll help them develop them. We'll give them the support and we'll train them. But that's good apprenticeship schemes and good employers working with young people. It's a partnership with the training providers to actually take someone from A all the way through. And I think the important thing is having good progression routes for them so they can see their futures as well.
Yeah, really important points. I'm going to pick up on some of that as well, Neil, but let me bring in Kirsty now. In your perspective, again, major employer, how are you seeing what employers want changing, I guess, and what you're looking for?
I think it sounds, as the other two panelists have said, it's very important having the right attitude, and I think a willingness to learn. I think flexibility is increasingly important as we're seeing, you know, all the changes going on around us. Also, digital skills are becoming increasingly important, particularly in an office space where we're going to be doing more hybrid working. And one other sort of significant change is there is more automation in the workplace, even in a law firm that sort of you'd expect more complicated work. So being able to operate at that higher end with that critical thinking and analysis is really important too.
Yeah, Kirsty, can I ask you, because obviously, you know, when you think of the legal profession, often there is that assumption amongst young people, right? That means I've got to be really academic. I've got to get a degree, probably. You know, what is that? How is that impacting your business in terms of recruiting people?
So we've actually spearheaded and trailblazed the apprenticeship programme, and we have professional services apprenticeships as well as legal. So and in the law firm I'm in, half of us aren't lawyers, so there's lots of career opportunities for people. And also we see transfer as well, so lawyers who then move across to the business professional side, and business professionals who then change and go across to the legal side. But I think really having that thirst for knowledge and willingness to learn. And also, you know, I think what really makes a successful professional is having a broader understanding, and certainly, you know, lawyers who take an interest in the wider, you know, sort of current affairs or get a specialist in a certain sector will do much better.
Yeah. Joe, I know you work with Kessie, don't you, and partners in Envision, and just could you say, from the young people's perspective, from the people you're talking to all the time, how are they seeing that there's a kind of change in what employers want? Are they seeing that their transferable skills are now just as important?
I think there's been a shift in the last couple of years in particular. I mean, for example, the Gatsby benchmarks have come in the last couple of years, and they feature really heavily in the DfE guidance and our Ofsted framework. I think that careers education has been spoken about and embedded and integrated into the curriculum earlier, as well as being just more kind of a priority within kind of the school education system. I think that there's still work to be done, and I don't think it's a case of it not being prioritised as such, but perhaps just not fully embedded. Obviously, the last 2 years has changed everything, and I think we were already on that path to young people seeing that kind of employability skills and these kind of essential kind of transferable skills that Kirsty's mentioned and both Ollie and Neil have already alluded to are much more important, and teachers obviously are very aware of that. I think that post-pandemic, if we're allowed to say post-pandemic yet, but in this post kind of COVID hitting us world, we are seeing that that's been sped up a bit, perhaps. So I think we're kind of on the move towards fully integrating kind of employability skills and that framework and those systems being implemented, but there's still some way to go, definitely.
Yeah. Mark, do you want to give us your thoughts on this as well? Oh, we're on the classic you're on mute situation. Wouldn't be a webinar without one.
Hi, Steph. We talk a lot about mindset, skill sets and networks, and very much kind of break it down into those three categories. So, how do we teach our young people, our sixth formers and our apprentices to be agile learners, to problem solve, and to have that resilience, to break down challenges that they find in the workplace in terms of having the right mindset to approach them with, having the technical skill sets to then be able to actually get on and solve some of those problems. Being a digital skills college, you can imagine that those are of paramount importance for us. But then also, I think the big thing is about being able to work in teams and having the social networks both within an organisation, but also wider than that as well. And I think that can often be very challenging, particularly for students from tougher backgrounds.
Yeah. Ollie, can I ask you, Joe mentioned there about careers guidance in schools, and we've all got those stories, haven't we, about careers guidance being terrible when we were growing up. And I know Joe was saying it's improved, but there's a few people commenting in the chat saying they don't think necessarily careers guidance is integrated. And I think part of the problem is that it's kind of patchy, isn't it? So because it's not something that necessarily Ofsted are going to give a great deal of weight to, teachers are working hard enough and trying to get them through their English and maths GCSE, and that seems to be the priority over these transferable skills and giving people, opening up their eyes to the world of work. So where are we on that front, Ollie, with careers actually being more integrated and not just this patchy system?
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Steph. Everyone has their favourite story of things not going great on the careers front, and I don't think there's ever been a golden age. So I think Joe's absolutely right. There've been some big steps in the right direction. I know we've got colleagues on in the audience from the Careers and Enterprise Company, and I think the Gatsby benchmarks as a way to try and encourage all schools to get on board are absolutely the right thing to do. But you can fulfill them. So just to give one example, all schools are meant to have a careers leader now, and that might be somebody who's full-time and working at it really hard, as it is in the school that I'm an enterprise advisor for in Sheffield, doing a brilliant job. But it might be a teacher's Wednesday afternoon job, just trying to kind of make do and make it work. And that's not the same level of service that they're going to get. So it's a big step in the right direction, but we think there's loads kind of further that we can go by really getting careers into the center. So one of the benchmarks is about careers and the curriculum. We think it should be careers is the curriculum. Like, why can't every lesson be connected to that real life example, be kind of really helping people to see when they're going to use that information and connecting up with employers? We did some polling during in COVID, and it was really telling that of parents and teachers, so 92% of parents said that they wanted education in future to help their children develop a range of skills like critical thinking and problem solving. So exactly what we've been talking about. And similarly, 95% of teachers felt the same. So there's no shortage of parents and teachers who are on board with this. It's just about trying to make sure the system is kind of catching up and giving them the chance and the space to do that.
Yeah, and then on top of this, and this has been mentioned by Joe within the chat function, is, the league tables of schools focus on exams. And I remember asking an education leader once, I talked to, funnily enough, the education secretary, about could we not do a league table of where people go to next, a kind of whatever it is, FE, HE, jobs, whatever. Wouldn't that be really interesting as a parent to be looking at that kind of league table rather than, just exams? I mean, Joe, do you ever see a world where we could have that?
I hope so. Yeah, I think it's really important, isn't it, that it's a process and it's a journey. And I mean, as an example, recently we had a focus group with our youth board, and they were discussing with us applying for apprenticeships. And the application process for apprenticeships, for example, it's basically like applying for a real job, but with an empty CV, which is really, really difficult. And I think there's a big shift in sixth forms and FE colleges across the country now, where apprenticeships are starting to be given the same kind of kudos as applying for HE, applying for Russell Group universities, and there's more kind of information, advice and guidance going into that in schools. But again, you've got two kind of things going on there. One, a lot of teachers, they went through a really traditional route into their career. They went from school to university, that as the career necessitates, it needs you to do that. So they maybe just don't have the personal and anecdotal experience of working in apprenticeships. When I was a teacher, I did that. I didn't know about apprenticeships application. So we need a bit of education within schooling so that we can really support our young people who do want to apply for apprenticeships and internships, etc. But equally, as has been said in the chat, and as you've just said, Steph, it's the league tables. What schools are judged on needs to reflect what's actually important for young people in their future careers. And so we do need to have this kind of balance between, it's just as important that young people can go into apprenticeships as it is they can get into universities.
It comes back to that point about parity of esteem, which I seem to, as much as we bang our heads on a wall screaming that they should be treated the same, there's still, and I find this in the media as well, there is, the majority of the people in the media talking about education went exactly the same route, through a degree, and that's the problem, is a lot of the people making the decisions have all done the traditional route and might give you a bit of lip service about vocational training, but don't necessarily understand it. I just want to ask Kirsty a question from an employer's perspective, because I've been doing this thing on our show every Thursday where we do like a jobs clinic, and we get a company on and get them to tell us about all the jobs that they've got going. And what is always staggering is, as you alluded to earlier, is the fact that there's a million different types of jobs within one company. You're a legal firm, but yet not everyone's legal. And so how do you get past that view of, there's quite a siloed view of businesses, and not the fact that, you'll have receptionists, you'll have this, caterers, whatever else. So how do you get past that, Kirsty?
So what we try and do is actually get out into schools and tell people and show that. And we have a Working with Schools programme, and I appreciate not all companies have the resources to do that, but I think there's such an opportunity there. And one of the things we've been doing is collaborating with other businesses. And I think there's a real opportunity with smaller enterprises, which make up a huge amount of our economy, and then perhaps in different parts of geography in the UK, which don't have such economic hubs to really help inform students about career opportunities. But for us, it's absolutely, I'm working with partners like Envision, where we can have that community outreach and explain all the different career opportunities there are.
Yeah, and obviously another thing around all of this, and a few people again are saying it in the chat, is work experience. So Neil, obviously COVID did not help on that front, did it? So I know, like, for example, on my show, we were planning on, because we've just moved to Leeds, bringing in loads of people who never normally get the chance to work in telly, coming in to work with us. And now all of that's just been kibosh. So, you know, I just want to know your thoughts, I guess, Neil, on that element of it, about we're asking kids to tell us about, or young people, I shouldn't say kids, young people, or people of all ages who are moving careers to tell us about their experience, but it's very hard to get it.
It is hard, and I think what's been quite amazing is we've got one part of an ambassador network as well for apprenticeships, and there's been a transition to actually, whilst we can't get into schools to talk to them, we are arranging firms and young people to go back into schools virtually to talk to them in lessons and remotely as part of their online learning as well. So I think people have shifted their opinion, but the world of work experience is really interesting as well, because I think it opens their eyes. As you've rightly said, Steph, there are just thousands of jobs, and even I that involved with firms now, it still surprises me that when I'm in contact with firms, it's just the sheer breadth. I've got 70 ambassador firms, and when I talk to them about all the job opportunities that sit within it, it's just mind-blowing.
Yeah.
A careers teacher has got no chance of understanding that world of work, and quite often it's through a family connection and knowledge of something. My industry, building services, we design buildings, part construction, but most people would never have heard of what we do, but it's one of the most interesting jobs, dealing with climate change, and all the challenges for young people are there. Once we get them in for an interview, the world of work just opens up and the opportunities. So I think it's, unfortunately, it's one of these things. Sometimes get your toe in, because even if you do a level 3 apprenticeship in one side, it doesn't stop you. You've not pigeonholed yourself forever. You can move across different apprenticeships into all different fields. In the same way with academic qualifications, you're not making a life choice.
Yeah, I just want to, I'm going to go back to Ollie in a sec, but it's just popped off my screen now. But there was somebody in Cambridge saying that they've organised buddies for teachers, employer buddies, and that's a really good idea, isn't it, to have people who work with the teachers to try and tell them about all these jobs, and that works, I guess, from both sides of businesses. Ollie, can I just ask you, obviously, you know, when we're talking about education policy or any policy, you know, often you're only talking about England and Wales or Scotland, and obviously Northern Ireland. It's all quite different, isn't it, quite often? So can you just give us that sense of the difference between the nations?
Yeah, of course. And we're really excited to have colleagues on the call from all the different nations of the UK and then abroad as well. And we're really keen at Edge at kind of trying to compare and find really good lessons. So I think actually the sad truth of it is actually England's a bit further behind the devolved nations in this area. So in Scotland, we've got things like developing young workforce, which is really integral to schools, and careers advisors still embedded in schools, as one of the colleagues in the chat was saying. So quite different from England. In Wales, we're just moving to a much more project-led curriculum. So again, really kind of integrating those broader skills. And in Northern Ireland, a really interesting focus on collaboration. So a lot less focus on the kind of competition between schools and colleges for places, and more around collaboration. And I think even further afield, we do a lot of work with the small islands around the UK as well. So believe it or not, Jersey still has the work experience program, which was called Trident from the 80s. Some colleagues on the call might remember. They're still running that. And when they go and talk to adults now who are in the workforce, they say, oh, yeah, I remember going on that. I'll definitely offer a place. So you're completely different from the really quick changes that we've seen in England over the last kind of few decades.
Yeah. Brilliant. Mark, can I ask you about just on the point of work experience? What I have noticed, you know, in the digital era we're in now, that there have been some companies that have offered work experience on a virtual basis, and given, you know, you're driving the digital skills training, is that something that could make a difference here? This idea of, or are you doing it already?
I certainly think it's worth exploring. I think there was a really good point in the chat just now by Catherine Fenwick about it needs to be, you know, employer engagement needs to be a steady drip over at least a 2-year period. I would argue. While we advocate for full work experience, and you know, whether that's virtual or going into an office, we also do a lot of live brief challenges with employers, where we pair our teachers up with employer volunteers, a bit like the buddy system you mentioned, and between them they design a project that the students then work on in small teams like they would in the workplace for 3 to 5 days, 3 times a year. So we do one with Deloitte, one with King Games, the Candy Crush people, and one with Salesforce. They do that for 3 to 5 days a year. And then there is the employer volunteers come in and give feedback at the end on the outputs that the students produce. And while it's not full-blown work experience, it allows them to have, you know, a regular engagement with employers without the complexities of employers having to deal with all the safeguarding issues of them coming into the workplace on a regular basis. So, you know, there are lots of different models that you can look at for employer engagement that young people can then talk about. Because I think Joe's point to earlier is, you know, 75% of our students, sixth form students, want an apprenticeship rather than to go to university. So they're really focused on getting these apprenticeships, but the problem is they don't have very much to talk about in the interview process. And if they don't have very much to talk about, it's very hard to differentiate themselves. So it's about finding different ways, whether it's full-blown work experience or just regular engagements with industry that they can then, they are then encouraged to then talk about in the interview process. And that all takes, you know, a kind of steady drip of careers guidance, employer engagement, feedback from teachers, feedback from pastoral care, pastoral careers advisors, people like that. And eventually it all comes together, we find, and we get very high success rates in terms of achieving apprenticeships. But it's almost a cultural thing rather than a strategy thing.
Yeah, because I mean, as I mentioned when I did the introduction about my education, and we very much did what you said, Mark, about because we were in an area in Middlesbrough of high industry. Our school was very much focused around the supply chain and the industry, and they'd set our design technology projects, or they'd, you know, the local businesses would set our physics projects and things, and all of that meant that at the age of 13 I knew what a supply chain was, and I, you know, and who would know that now at 13 if you didn't have that kind of system. But again, I also knew about what jobs there were, so I knew that for me an engineering apprenticeship would be a good one, especially as a woman, because there was loads of money being thrown at it, and I was quite money orientated at the time. So again, it's like, it is that thing, if you say it's about being more creative, I guess, Joe, in terms of how you work with people in education to get those opportunities when the typical someone coming in to talk about their job doesn't necessarily fit what we need anymore. And I know, Joe, with all this kind of social enterprise stuff you do, it's exactly that, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, just to absolutely echo what Mark's just said there, it's got to be integrated. And I mean, I would say from day one, I mean, I know that I'm being a bit more kind of, you know, optimistic and thinking that we could be integrating this from the moment young people start in school, from the moment curriculum starts at, you know, 4 or 5 years old, right the way through your career, your school career. They need to go alongside one another. And yeah, but kind of what we do at Envision is we do find ways of partnering businesses like Kirsty's, but Burgess Salmon's a long-standing partner with us. We've been working with them for the last 7 years, and we find local businesses to partner with schools. The thing is that we can do that. We can be that go-between, because at the moment schools can't necessarily, they don't necessarily have the resource, and we've spoken a bit about not having the capacity within a school. You know, all schools are meant to have careers lead, whether they do or not, and to what extent, as Ollie mentioned, whether that's their full-time teaching and learning responsibility, whether that's just their part-time, what they're meant to do in their lunchtime, does differ from one institution to the other. So at the moment, what we do at Envision is we do sit as that go-between, that middle person, where we can find a business like Burgess Salmon, who have a wonderful CSR department, and we can just partner them with a school and get those young people and those employees talking and engaging in a, we like to do it in a non-traditional way. For us, you know, it's not about kind of a more traditional hierarchy of work experience where young people get lectured by an employee about what needs to go into this job or this organisation, but more we try and facilitate the ability for young people to work collaboratively with their business mentors. We use social action as a vehicle to do this, and they work on social action projects together, and we just find that actually allows a more Yeah, a more natural, informal way of young people engaging with adults they don't know. It builds their social confidence, their communication skills in a way that maybe non-traditional ways of work might not. And also, again, just to kind of go back to something that Neil said earlier, there are a million different jobs out there. You're never going to be able to tell every young person every single job that they might ever want to do. So instead of trying to tick all the boxes, if we just allow those conversations and we allow that discussion and that dialogue between employees and young people to kind of happen a bit more naturally, hopefully you just hope that something will trigger someone off on the right path.
Yeah. Kirsty, can I ask you from an employer's perspective what difference it's made to recruitment, and because you've got this partnership now with Envision?
Yeah, so one thing that's really important to us is diversity and inclusion and a focus on social mobility. And we see the benefits of that in the workplace in terms of innovation and creative thinking, and also having people in our business who can relate more to our client base. So, it's really important for us. And also, it's very competitive for talent in the legal sector. So we want to make sure we're accessing all the talent that's possibly out there. And by supporting programs like we do with Envision, absolutely supports and enable that. And we are finding that students who've had touch points with us through our Working with Schools program are then more inclined to apply to Burgess Salmon as an employer.
Yeah. There's loads of chat going on, which is fantastic to see. It's worth a read if you're not looking at it, because there's lots of people talking about what they've done in their regions, or people who have explaining about the experience they've had, or putting forward ideas as well. So thank you very much for those. Still loads to chat about, but Ollie, I know you're going to tell us about something you want to show us now to do with some events you've been running around this.
Yeah, that's right. So we've just kicked off a 4-year study called Young Lives, Young Futures with colleagues at King's College London. And it's going to look at how young people move through these key ages between 14 and 18, where they get their decision making kind of ideas, where they get their careers guidance, whether they got information about the new T levels, whether they thought about apprenticeships, and kind of really understand how they move through. So we launched that a couple of weeks ago, and we took a bit of a different approach. We banned the researchers from coming on the virtual stage, and we had a roundtable with young people themselves telling us about their lives and their futures. So what we've got is just a clip from that to really understand some of their life stories and bring young people's own experiences into this discussion.
It's been stuck in the old ways for a long time. Students are forced to learn an insane amount of knowledge to sit written exams that aren't for everyone, to then maybe forget about them 6 months later. It's just short-term memory, I think, for a lot of cases. Unless a student's really passionate about something, they won't switch on for the things that they're trying to learn for.
So I say no massively. Like the purpose of education is to serve our young people for their future. But what's currently in the actual curriculum, some of it is just purely like, you just know, like, why am I learning about this? What does this have to do with me getting a house, with me getting a car, with me learning how to write a CV and go into actual work?
In order to move forward into, into the world of work and beyond, and that if you don't get A to C, then you're almost classed as a failure. And so I'm just interested to know, like, is that sort of model outdated, and are we starting to begin to move into a more skilled-based economy where employees are starting to favour things such as, like, work experience and your CVs and the actual skills that you have over, a number or a grade?
I think well, speaking from personal experience, when I graduated last year, I graduated with a first class honours degree, but I still really, really struggled to get a job.
I feel like we have very much a success before survival approach to education in this country. We have the kind of idea that we must, churn out grades and the best possible grades for schools to be seen with a great reputation. If you have a young person in your life that you love deeply, what do you want them to gain from education? What do you want them to go to education and see? You want them to feel safe. You want them to be valued. You want them to be nurtured. If we can build an education system that sees those things and that values those things and values a young person as a young person, then hopefully we're building a better system. And that's all I can hope for, really.
If you take it onto a sort of personal level, what would you like for that young person? I think that's a really great way to look at it. For me, mine's built on empathy, mine's built on understanding, equality, a sense of community. And education, to me, shouldn't be about the grades, and shouldn't be about going through what feels like an exam factory that feels so intense and so pressurizing. I feel like it should be an experience, something that is encouraged for young people to see education as lifelong. What is your vision for education moving forward as young activists, as change makers, as people in this world that want to make the idea of education better and more inclusive?
It needs to prepare people and young people for the future effectively. As we mentioned, and as all the points have raised, it just doesn't do it. It just doesn't do it in any way possible. It doesn't prepare them the skills needed to grow up and learn about taxes or mortgages, about buying a car or anything. It doesn't make them employable. Especially it won't prepare them for the post-pandemic world.
I think we have the responsibility to like activate change making within our peers. And I think it's the ability to help young people see themselves as individuals and what skills they need that are outside of the classroom, you know, critical thinking and change making and an ability to see their worth. It's all of these skills. And I think as young people, our ability to our responsibility now is to promote those skills, you know, to believe in other young people and to constantly promote the power of the other young people.
Because right now, where there's essentially reduced content and no exams, we're actually surviving. Whereas before, maybe 2 years ago, the idea of not having GCSEs or A-levels was like, how could we ever? Although it's difficult now, it's potentially something that we can consider in the future.
Yeah, it's definitely shifted. I think I'm more hopeful now, which sounds really strange. But I'm more hopeful that young people have found their voice and that there's a way of creating change in this society, and young people are being heard more or demanding that they're heard more. So yeah, if I can say anything, I'm more hopeful now.
Well, I mean, I think everyone agrees from what people are saying on the chat, and I certainly feel, I mean, they've put that so articulately, that kind of says it all really, doesn't it? And, you know, it's just hearing it come from the horse's mouth, the people who actually are the ones in education trying to work out what they're going to do with their lives and what skills they need. I think that says it all. And I want to come back in a moment about just to talk about what we think does need to change, because I know, again, amongst the chat, lots of people are mentioning schemes that have been around for years and actually they're doing the job, and can't we focus more on them? And everyone's kind of throwing in their thoughts on what actually the answer is here. And I want to focus on that shortly. But at this point now, I think we should have our first interactive poll. So let me bring Ellen just to explain how that's going to work and what the question is that's going to be asked. And if you could grab your phones that you've kept near you, that would be lovely.
It's great. Thank you so much, Steph. So I popped in the chat just a link to the menti.com platform. So if you've got your phones, it's a bit easier on there. You'll just want to log into www.menti.com and pop in the access code that I've shared in the chat. Meanwhile, let me just share my screen and we will hopefully kind of meet each other at the landing page. If there are any issues accessing, I'm sure the Edge team will jump in and let me know. That's great. I can see people joining, so I'll just give that a couple of seconds.
So once everyone's joined, then we'll find out what the question is Elle wants us to answer. We'll have a chat about it.
That's brilliant. Thanks, Steph. Great. So as you all just come in, I'm just going to move us on to the first question of this slot. So here we were really keen to kind of do a bit of a temperature check to start off. So the audience, you're all invited to kind of on a sliding scale, let us know how you think young people are being prepared for the future of work. So again, you can just use that on the sliding scale on your phone and results should start coming in. And then Steph, I'll let you comment on the results as they start to come in.
Yeah. Now, it'll be interesting this because obviously I can imagine, depending on where you are and what kind of background you're from and the region you're in and how good they are at doing careers where you are, that could make a big difference to what you think here compared to others. So we'll just find out. We've got 148 people who've given us their thoughts so far, and at some point we'll be able to see whether you think it's not at all well or extremely well in terms of young people being prepared for the future of work.
That's great. Thanks, Steph. I wonder if there are lots of people, so it's just taking a bit of time to settle in there.
Yeah. We're all used to patience needed on Zooms now, aren't we? With so.
I may just flick us back one and move forward just to see if we've got a bit of a frozen screen going on. So let me just move us forward. There we go.
Yeah. Oh, so fairly. I'm assuming that's out of 10, Elle, is it?
Yes, it's out of 10, Steph.
Right. So it's slightly leaning towards the not at all well, but not too far from the middle, which suggests that, you know, again, some places are getting it right and some aren't, but overall, not everyone is. Ollie, do you want to give us your thoughts on what you're seeing coming in? I mean, it's not a great shock, is it? Because
no, I think that's exactly right, and kind of reflects what we've been talking about. I think you're absolutely right, Steph. It's it is a bit of a postcode lottery. It depends on the school, it depends on the area. I think from all of the teachers and frontline professionals we've talked to, their hearts are all in the right place. They're all desperate to do this, but they are held back a bit by some of the bits in the system, by the EBAC, by the Progress 8, by the performance tables, by some of the Ofsted framework. So I think maybe that's kind of what's reflected here, like a willingness amongst the frontline, but held back by some of the system.
yeah, it actually does my head in when teachers get the blame for it, because it's like teachers are meant to solve every problem known to man. Like they have to solve financial literacy for the whole world. They have to, you know, solve mental health for everyone. It's maybe we need to talk a bit more as well that we haven't mentioned yet about parents. And I know someone mentioned that on the chat earlier about where parents and carers sit amongst all of this. Jo, do you want to give us your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, again, as a former teacher myself, I remember the feeling of it falling on your shoulders. But I think that the will is there, and as I kind of mentioned earlier, there is, you know, it is prioritised. It is like the Gatsby benchmarks, active citizenship, all of these kind of careers, education, and creating civic-minded young people and successful, you know, members of the society and community. They're all there in the frameworks, but it's just about kind of resource and funding, and also just like how we can work a bit more kind of cross-sector as well. I mean, going back to the amazing work that places like Burgess Salmon do, where they have such great departments that are completely you know, dedicated to CSR and outreach and working with their local communities and schools within their local communities, but there just isn't the ability for schools to be able to pick up on this and work with those businesses as well, because the funding and the resource just isn't there. So yeah, I'm not surprised with this poll, and I think that everyone probably, or most people, will agree that the will's there, but it's just finding the way now.
Yeah, and Mark, do you want to pick up on anything here as well? Well, we've got the mute.
Sorry, always the mute. Just 2 points for me. The new Ofsted framework, we're actually reasonably in favour of it. It does allow you to be more purposeful around, you know, we're very explicit. We exist to support young people into entry-level technical jobs, and that's our purpose, and therefore we've designed our curriculum around that and achieving that. You know, I guess we're a specialist technical FE college, so, you know, it's in some ways we're very purpose-driven. But the problem is that Ofsted then focuses so on the Progress 8 and those other key measures that really limits the curriculum breadth. But there's sort of, so there is a yin and a yang within the new Ofsted framework in terms of opportunities around focusing on careers and you know, careers guidance. The only other thing I would say is that I think schools are obsessed, and many parents are obsessed with getting their young people still to university. And that parity of esteem point you mentioned earlier, Steph, is there's varying degrees of parity of esteem, but the most important parity of esteem is really social perception, and that is it's a kind of an insidious thing that is not going away and not really changing in schools or in society at large. And I don't have any great suggestions about how to deal with that, but I do think it is, it's a real mitigating factor in terms of getting a wholesale system change.
Yeah, I wonder though if because I hear that all the time about the parental esteem, especially, in terms of, if it's a family where no one's ever gone to uni before, there's very much a sense of they want better for their kids, and you can understand why parents think like that. But, degree apprenticeships now are kind of an answer. And Neil, I just want to know your thoughts, because why should we have two siloed ways anyway? Degree apprenticeships show that you can bring things together, and we meet the parents' expectations as well as doing it the way that young people, they choose to learn is best for them.
Yeah, and I think we've noticed, probably we're only an SME, but what we've noticed in terms of our intake is that we are inundated now with really good A-level applications to join our apprenticeship scheme on the engineering side, which is probably 90% of the job roles we look to fill. But what we're finding is now becoming first choice for those that can find a degree apprenticeship to leave at 18 and pursue their career with an organisation that will foster their technical education alongside their academic study with a completely integrated learning programme. Is actually something of really high value. So what we're finding, even though we're not a household name, our apprenticeship scheme is totally oversubscribed at an SME, because people and parents, I think, in the last 2 to 3 years have made that transition to understand it's the cheapest option. And if you come from a disadvantaged background, the difference, I think, about 3 years ago was about £180,000, the difference in the two routes. Well, how many families these days can afford that difference in terms of paying for an education as opposed to being paid to do a job and learn? I think it's a no-brainer. So the really bright students are choosing apprenticeships now, and parents.
Yeah, but coming back to that parent point, Kirsty, what from an employer's perspective, is that something you guys ever have to deal with as well? Is just trying to get over parental barriers to people doing the non-traditional route into your company?
Well, what we try and do with our Working with Schools programme, certainly with our work experience, is have as much dialogue as possible with carers and parents, and actually get them at the end of the programme to come into our place of work, so that we're building their experience and their understanding as well. And yeah, I think the apprenticeship routes, and we offer that as well, it's a great, and we're certainly seeing that they're very competitive, because young people who want to have that attainment, but without necessarily the student debt, is a really attractive option. So
yeah, there's a few people mentioning about things they're doing with parents connected to their schools and things as well. And actually, there was a school I was working with in Middlesbrough recently where in a very I think, did I just suddenly disappear then? Am I back?
Oh, you're fine, Steph. We can see you.
Yeah, great. You never know on these things. All of a sudden, everything changes, isn't it, on the screen? I was just saying, there was a school I was working with recently who have been teaching kids about money in the school, just to, again, really tough area. So they wanted to help the kids understand, and from nursery age they're teaching them about money, and it's all to do with the scheme Young Money. But what was interesting, and I know people are talking about this in the chat, was they brought the parents in to be part of it as well. So the parents who were also struggling with money, but they didn't do it in the kind of patronizing, come in and we'll teach you about your benefits, or we'll teach you about credit cards or loans or whatever. They did it under the guise of come and be in and be part of your kids' education. And to begin with, it was to take up was a bit tricky, but now it's really thriving. And you do, and I know people are talking about this on the chat, saying that's a really good thing that they've done as well, is actually bringing parents into it, because let's face it, they're often the key adults that young people are listening to when they're making decisions.
Steph, could I add on that, because I think that's such an important point, and a few people in the chat have mentioned the work that we've been doing in the northeast of England with colleagues at the Northeast LEP, and then it's spread to colleagues with the Wood Foundation in Scotland. We've got colleagues from there as well, and one of the kind of key elements of that is around project-based learning, and it's about kind of bringing those real projects to life in the schools. So moving from parents being brought in just for parents' evening and feeling a bit worried and a bit like maybe it's triggering some memories of when they were at school, to coming in and presenting, seeing their kids present like an amazing project back to an employer like Neil or Kirsty, showing what they've done, being really proud, and it's drawn the parents in. That wasn't even the main thing we were going for, but it's drawn the parents in such a positive way, and allowed them to be part of kind of the celebrating that student success and working on that real project, rather than worrying that they haven't been sitting still in maths and that they might get told off.
Yeah, it's fantastic to hear that, isn't it? Can I just ask as well about special needs and neurodiverse children and kind of what we're doing on that front as well? Joe, have you, I don't know who might be best on that, but I'm getting a few comments that are coming up just around, you know, we're talking about young people as a kind of homogenous lump, aren't we? But actually everyone's needs are so different now.
Yeah, I mean, we don't specialise in that area, but we do work with, so at Envision, we target young people who are kind of underserved in the world of work, if you like, and that targeting criteria kind of covers, I mean, low income households is one of the main criteria for us. We are a social mobility charity, but also we do work with young people who are high risk of becoming NEET, so not in the employment, education or training, and often those young people will fall in under the kind of the umbrella of SEND, special educational needs and disabilities. Often a lot of our young people have English as an additional language, and yeah, so I mean, I'm not an expert in this field, and that's not what we are experts in Envision, but definitely finding a way of bringing all young people along on that journey for careers guidance and education is so important, which again is why I've been speaking a lot about it always being integrated. I mean, I think that there's also been quite a lot of chat today, and quite rightly, and there's still a huge debate out there of like kind of a knowledge-based curriculum versus a skills-based curriculum. I think that the vast majority of humankind live somewhere in the grey area, and actually we understand that you can't have one without the other. It's not a chicken and egg situation. They have to work together, and you can't have knowledge without being able to develop the skill set to acquire knowledge, and vice versa. You can't develop your skills without having a solid foundation of knowledge underneath that. So I think that kind of links to being able to work for all ability young people as well, doesn't it? That you need to make sure that these things happen from day one, integrated into a really strong curriculum. And by curriculum, I mean everything that young people do at school, because that's all part of their curriculum, and take them through that journey and give them as many opportunities to have meaningful encounters, meaningful engagements as possible, because you just never know which thing is going to, you know, hit the mark with which young person. We're all different, and all of the young people we work with are different. So it's just allowing them to have as many opportunities to take that in as they go. Yeah, I don't know if anyone has anything to add or has more experience than I do in that field.
Kirsty, you've unmuted yourself.
I can add a little bit to that. So one of the things we've done is we have internal diversity and inclusion networks. We've got one around race, one around sexual orientation, but also one around disability. And what we've been doing with those internal networks is linking them up into our Working with Schools programme. And also some colleagues are actually volunteering as careers enterprise advisors in schools. So it really is a great opportunity to reach out to sort of special needs or specific areas and join that up. And one other thing we're doing is we're supporting the Kickstart programme, and we're not large enough to do it completely on our own, so we're collaborating with the local authority, and actually the work experience placement that we're creating through that is for a special needs placement.
Yeah, Ollie.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, we've talked a bit about knowledge, we've talked a bit about skills, but I don't think we should be afraid of talking about values as well. And we're wanting to create a generation of young people who are kind, who are looking after people of other ages, of other neurodiversities. Just a couple of examples I've seen that have made me really passionate about this. One of the schools we work with has an autism unit built into it. And rather than them working separately, the children who are in the mainstream and the autism unit buddy up and they get to know each other. And just seeing some of the relationships blossom between them was just beautiful, because those people are going to be working with people of different neurodiversities in the workplace. Why not start early? Meanwhile, another of our schools, XP in Doncaster, one of their values is about being kind. And they did a project where each of their students buddied an older person in the community who had dementia, became a dementia friend, and then made a little shoebox of their life so that they could help to remember some of their happy memories. So yeah, just nice examples of, let's not be afraid of having those values. We want them in our families, we want them in our colleagues. So let's try and instill them.
Yeah, Neil, you're nodding along there. Anything you want to add?
Yeah, I think I absolutely agree. One thing we use with our apprentices, we actually make the apprentices the role models and mentors for the year group behind them, and they take that responsibility to developing. So when employers say actually apprenticeships take a lot of time, they don't actually, because the apprentices actually manage the scheme and look after the following year groups. And I think fostering that care about the generation behind you is something that's really important, and that's actually is fundamental to how the apprenticeship scheme is structured. I remember when I was a youngster, there was probably 3 or 4 people I could think of automatically that helped me in my life and helped me on my journey. And I think what it does is that it instills in you that it's about paying it back. It's about doing something for somebody else in an apprenticeship scheme. It's about training all the skills you've gained over a lifetime to the next generation. And I think that's where an apprenticeship scheme done right is so important. And actually, the young apprentices take responsibility for it, and they become amazing young people as a result.
Yeah, it's all very inspiring, this. I'm loving it. I should remind everyone as well, again, I'm in the chat section if you haven't looked at it yet. People are putting links in there to projects they're part of or ones they're recommending you use, which is really good to see as well. So do have a look in there. I mean, there's quite a few, so you could be scrolling for a while, but it's definitely worth having a good read of everything that's being said. Can I ask you then, just moving neatly on to kind of what changes we want to see or we think there should be in terms of preparing young people for the world of work? And obviously we've touched on quite a few things now, but Mark, have you got any thoughts on just, what you're a training provider, what needs to be done more? What do we need to see to actually prepare young people?
Well, one thing, sorry, I did slightly flip that for a second, if I may, Steph. I still think there's a lot of employers that are very scared about apprenticeships, particularly the employers that we, more service-based employers that we typically work with. So we train level 4 to 6 digital apprentices. Most of the companies that we work with had never taken apprentices before they started working with us. And there's still a lot of nervousness about it. So I think there's still a big piece to be done on that side of it. I think certain sectors are a long way ahead of other sectors, but there are so many benefits to it. And all the employers we work with enjoy taking apprentices once they've got over that initial fear. And I think it is supporting more employers to get over that initial fear and see apprentices as a genuine new talent pipeline into their businesses. For young people, for the most part, we find it is about confidence, and that is access to, what I said earlier about that slow drip feed of opportunities. Sounds like you benefited from it as well, Steph. I think the problem with government funding is it's often time limited. It's very focused to a specific intervention, and you can't change somebody's life in a week. You can't change it in a month. You can probably make a bit of a dent in 3 months if you really do it well. But to really change someone's perceptions, both of themselves and of their opportunities in life, takes we think at least 12 months. Really, we talk a lot about the 12-month plus courses we have. We talk about them being transformational. Anything under 12 months, we just talk about them being beneficial. And I think it's really important to recognise that. And it's hard to it's often hard for government to provide funding that can accommodate those transformational, life-changing opportunities. Really, the answer would be to increase the core funding that schools and colleges get. But obviously, in the current circumstances we're in, that's going to be particularly challenging.
Yeah, unfortunately, the answer to everything about what do we need more of is money, isn't it? When it comes to these types of
the one thing I would say, I'll just jump back in quickly. I do think I think a lot of schools and colleges miss a trick in terms of working with employers to unlock philanthropy funding. I think particularly larger corporates, there is a lot available out there. Obviously, we're London based. I think it is easier in London or in urban areas than perhaps in more rural areas. But we seek to raise about $500,000 a year in philanthropy to supplement the funding that we get from government. We've been successful in doing that. And I think there is funding out there. But again, schools are not equipped to go looking for it for the most part.
Yeah, and that's true. There is, if you have, that's the thing that comes back to time, doesn't it? And being able to look for all these different pots of cash and all the different businesses that might support you. But it is definitely true, Mark, that there are lots out there because it's in their interest as well, because, they're all facing this precipice of not having enough people to do the jobs they need them for. You're always hearing the statistics, aren't we, from the likes of the CBI, the Business Lobby Group, talking about the change in the world of work and the massive skills gaps we have. Ollie, you've got another film for us, haven't you?
We have, yeah. So this one's a nice short one, and a big shout out to my brilliant colleagues Laura and Cherokee, and also our animator Nick for this one. So we've spent the last few years really looking around the world at some of the most amazing examples, places like High Tech High that have been mentioned in the chat, places that we've mentioned here in the UK as well. We've been boiling that down into our recipe for things that we'd like to change and ways that we'd like to help schools and colleges to change their pedagogy. So this is a short animated film, just giving you an insight into that, and then we can share some more information in the chat about that too.
Imagine you were given the power to design a new model of education. Gone with the outdated classrooms, the exam factories, the bureaucracy. If you had the power to press reset, what might your ideal system of education look like? From the curriculum through to how our schools and colleges operate, there has never been a better time for us to reinvent, to rethink education. But how can we be sure that it's better for everyone? And how do we get there? With the help of schools, colleges, and an international network of partners, we are working to build a new model, a new recipe for success, what we call Edge Future Learning. As with any recipe, you need the right ingredients. We believe there are 3 key ways that schools and colleges can start to broaden and transform education, making it relevant to the 21st century. The first ingredient, community-connected learning, goes beyond showing young people how to adapt to society. Instead, it empowers them to shape the world around them. Project-based learning helps students to become more active learners by investigating complex questions over extended periods of time, increasing engagement and enhancing soft skills. The final ingredient, real-world learning, offers a first-hand experience of the workplace, giving staff and students the opportunity to explore different career pathways and fulfil their potential. We are currently working with schools and colleges across the country to implement these ideas. Together, we can reimagine education. Visit Edge Future Learning to find out more.
Much for that. Beautiful graphics as well. It's interesting, that point obviously being made there amongst that film is about connection, isn't it? And the kind of connection and community between employers, as Mark was talking about as well, and schools and colleges and training providers. And so I guess, how do we get that? How do we, because that's the dream, isn't it? To have a seamless connection so we all know what everyone's doing and it's all fit for purpose and all that great stuff. So Neil, what do you think we need in order to have that better connection between education and employers?
I think it is forming those connections. It's about Teams is just and working virtually. I think so many employers have made that transition that we can connect so much easier, more readily without all the travel, all the obstacles. So maybe actually when we're all coming out of this and we're all carrying on, we need to explore the things where, face-to-face meetings are probably the right way we go back to at some point, but there's so many opportunities that the virtual world can give us with connecting with schools more regularly, with employers, with training providers, and actually breaking down the barriers. And maybe that's something we need to work a little bit harder about how we can achieve that. And people need to give some thought to that. How do we break those barriers down? And maybe the virtual world, to give up your time. I can give my time now an hour to a young person in London to mentor them because they haven't got the parental connections or networks to talk to. So the power of the hour that I'm working with, purely I can dial in and give that hour really effectively. So maybe we can build on the whole, what we've learned during the pandemic as a way forward to change how we work together more effectively.
Yeah. Kirsty, what would you say in terms of things you've learned, I guess, from your connection to education and advice you might give to others thinking about how they can make it better for them?
So I think there's lots of ways that employers can get involved. There's sort of light touch activities to there's more in-depth, running full-blown work experience programs. Also, as well as say, don't be afraid to innovate. So some of the things we've done has absolutely been around the curriculum and giving students that understanding of how things are actually used in the workplace, and actually collaborating with teachers to deliver curriculum within our offices. So yeah, I think it's be brave, don't be constrained, and be creative in the way you approach it. And yeah, there's a whole range of options of the way employers can engage with schools. And I think also, yeah, reach out and push for those connections as well. And I also think, yeah, probably final point is share and advocate and support other businesses and other employers getting involved too.
Yeah. Ollie, can I just come back to you on the fact that, again, this is all really great, but for some, it might be more aspirational than realistic because of, time pressures and budgetary pressures and everything else. So what are your thoughts on how schools or how employers are managing to do it under those constraints?
Great question, Steph. So I think none of what we're talking about is something that's going to cost a huge amount more money, and it has to be something that's integrated into what's already being done. So we're not saying like teach the curriculum on the one hand for the exams and then separately set up this big separate school almost next door. We're saying let's teach it through. It doesn't have to be either or. So if you need to know that knowledge for your exams, let's learn it in a way that's really connected to the real world, that helps to inspire young people, make them understand why they're learning it. So they can sit the exam, yes, but that's not the reason why they're at school. They're at school to learn those values, to develop those skills, and the exam is kind of secondary to that. So just to give you some examples, like if a young person is interested in medicine, let's say, why can't in the maths lessons we be talking to actual employers in that field, be talking about titrating units of insulin, or looking at somebody's temperature chart? It's the same information we're learning. We're not saying don't learn that knowledge, but how much more engaging if you're interested in medicine to do it through that way. We've seen it working in other countries. People in the chat have been mentioning the Academies of Nashville, which is one of the examples we've used a lot. We've started to bring that into schools in the Northeast, and colleagues are doing the same in Scotland. So it is possible. And I think, don't be afraid to just take that first step. You don't have to change everything at once. It could be that you just take your first step and do your first project as a teacher, reach out to your first employer, bring that person in. We're not talking about a massive sea change overnight. So gently, and kind of over time, you can just bring in some of those new practices to the way that we teach and the way that we give young people those skills.
Wouldn't it be nice if the curriculum was already geared that way though? Because that's part of the problem, isn't it? It's like teachers having to work out and innovate themselves rather than like, I know, and obviously I'm not making a party political point, but it does feel like, you're all singing from the same hymn sheet and it's pretty obvious what needs to happen. But
yeah, I think it's fair to say that at the moment it's teachers doing this amazingly in spite of the system, not because it's what the system's asking, for sure.
Yeah, Joe, give us your thought then, as an organisation that works with employers like Kirsty, your thoughts and advice on building that relationship and making it, not too cumbersome or, as I say, leading to time constraints or money problems or whatever else.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, the way Envision works with corporate partners is we find a local business and we actually work as that go-between of making those links between schools and their local community businesses. you know, companies are moving towards, you know, companies do have strong CSR and outreach policies now, and they want to make a big difference in their local community, and the schools are, you know, screaming out for them. And as it stands at the moment, you know, we at Envision are very happy to be the go-between. You know, as with anyone working in our sector, in the third sector, I think you should always be hoping that one day you'll be out of business because the education system will just do it for you. But in the meantime, that's what we do at Envision. We kind of create that connection between a local corporate partner or a local business and the school, and just finding, again, going back to what Kirsty said, quite innovative ways of creating that connection. We personally at Envision, we want to support our companies and our partners to tick those boxes, but also to hit those KPIs within their own companies, of like building the soft skills. I know we didn't like that word earlier, Steph, but those soft skills in their employees as well. You know, by working with our young people, employees in a company will also build their confidence, build their social and inner confidence. They'll work collaboratively, they work in teams. We also do, as I mentioned before, use social action as a vehicle. Again, active citizenship is huge within the frameworks with the DfE and the Ofsted frameworks, and so they should be. I think it is important to, you know, point out that social action and employability skills do go hand in hand. They're both about creating civic-minded young people, you know, successful members of the community. That's really what schools are about, right? It's a school at its base, at its heart, is about creating a successful member of the community, and that is both within their social action and how they treat their community and how they treat the people within it, and also being able to go out and be a good, successful employer or employee. So they do go hand in hand, they work together, and we like to bring those together in one journey because you know, it feels like a more positive way of looking at it rather than just creating young workers. That's not what we're about. We're about creating young people who will become successful adults, rather than just, you know, again, going back to the exam factory, going back to all school's about is making you good at work. It's about making you a good person, and to go back to Ollie's point about values.
And to having a nice life as well, isn't it? I mean,
and to being a happy person, exactly.
And kind, and that all say, right. George, you want to actually tell us about the film you're going to show, because it kind of fits in with everything you've just been saying. So should we neatly segue into the film?
Absolutely, yes, it is a nice neat segue. So this is just a short film of our Envision Key Stage 4 programme. So that's working with kind of 14-15-year-olds, and it shows a little bit about what we do. So as I've kind of mentioned previously, Envision exists to build confidence and develop essential employability skills in young people, and we use social action as a framework and a vehicle to do that. Yeah, and I'll just let the film play now, because I think I've explained enough about what we do.
Envision is a social mobility charity that is designed to help improve the prospects of young people by developing key skills that they will need later in life. Envision's Key Stage 4 Community Apprentice Programme is centred around 3 challenges: the Awareness Raising Challenge, the Fundraising Challenge and the Pitching Challenge. At the beginning of the programme, each school is paired up with a business from London. These businesses provide volunteers to help mentor the students throughout the programme. This is a fantastic opportunity for the students to gain an insight into the world of work and how the skills that they develop on the programme could be used in the future. They choose a charity at the beginning of the programme. This is really about getting them passionate about something in their local community.
The difference I've seen in our young people who've taken part in the programme has been absolutely immense. Changes such as confidence, being more resilient, teaching them just to be really good citizens as well in terms of finding their passion and, you know, making a change. So that's been quite a delight to see.
Before I started, I guess I was a little quiet, and this program really did help me a lot, especially with me being myself around school and like outside. The business mentors are incredible, and I don't think I would be able to do this sort of challenge without them.
The transformation is remarkable. They're kind of very much more engaged. they're active, they're enjoying the interaction.
A lot of us have maybe come from backgrounds of maybe not as affluent as some others, and we've actually done well for ourselves, and we can give them the confidence that they can do that as well. From the first time they read us the presentation, they were all laughing and giggling and shy. So when they actually went up on stage, they were completely different people.
Today we are here at the final of the 3 challenges that the teams face on the programme, and it is the pitching challenge, and it's a really amazing event because we get all of the schools back together to compete and to see how much work they've all been doing for their different charities in their own schools and businesses.
We raised a lot of money and awareness for the charity. I did an assembly for our young years.
Really interesting to work with our business mentors and learn a lot more about the working place that you don't necessarily get to experience in school.
They think that they probably think Carlito, by the age of 60, he's going to be in jail. They probably think Matthias is probably going to die before he even finishes university or something like that. But having Envision, it just shows us that we're not like that. All of us here, we all have ambition, we all want to be something.
And the winner is Pretty
Oh, fantastic. You could just see it all on their faces, couldn't you, how much it meant to them. And also, everyone loves a big check, don't they? Shall we bring Elle back in? Because I think we're going to do another poll now. Elle, do you want to tell us about it?
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks, Steph. So we just had 2 final questions for you all in this final polling set. And hopefully you have your phone on you and Menti might still be open. But if not, I've popped a link to the poll again into the chat. And again, let me share my screen and I will meet you all on the Menti side. Okay, so hopefully you can see that all. And Steph, I'll leave that with you to kind of explore the results that are coming in. And then we just had one other follow-up question after this one.
Yeah, so the question, as I'm sure you can all see, in a couple of words, what needs to be done to better support young people? And obviously this is one of those word clouds. So the words that you can see more boldly are the ones that the majority of people are saying. So it's probably going to shift around as more people click on what they want to pick. Role models has just come out big there. We haven't talked about role models, but they're key. I know in the chat, some of you were talking about alumni, and I think that's I just think that that's absolutely crucial, is using the people who've been through whatever it is, education or training or whatever, and using them to tell the story, because then it's much more authentic. To support, again, funding, obviously, as we've said. But yeah, I mean, Ollie, do you want to give us a flavour on role models? Because that is key, isn't it? I know that I go back to my school a lot and they're all like, what, you're around school and you're on telly? That's not, you know, and it just proves, doesn't it, that they can do what you've done.
Yeah, I think that's so important, Steph, and it can be role models in so many different ways. It doesn't, obviously it's amazing to have somebody like you come back to a school, but just an older pupil, as Neil was saying, an older apprentice, somebody you left last year and made a success, somebody's parent who does a different job that you might not have thought of, somebody in your local community who runs a small business. These are all role models, and I think we sometimes underestimate how much those kind of individual contacts stick in people's minds. I guess what we'd love to see is kind of going from maybe the kind of assembly with a role model to then thinking about how can we go a bit further than that? How could we build a project into the curriculum that brings that person's kind of expertise to bear? It might be, Steph, when you go in, beforehand, they could have done a bit of work in their English class developing, a script for a program, and then you could be judging which ones are best. Just ways that kind of just take it to that next level, really, and use those role models to really build enthusiasm around a subject.
Yeah, the other thing as well I've seen, just from obviously over the years interviewing lots of different business leaders, the ones that are often the most successful are the ones who have a 360 approach to it as well. So they're listening just as much to what their younger staff or less experienced staff are telling them. And I think it's about that gives confidence to young people, doesn't it too? If you're telling them that what they're guiding the boss of a company on is just as useful as what they're telling you. That's important as well as a 360. Kirsty, do you have anything like that in your company where you kind of, it's not just one direction?
Yeah, so Berger Summer is really hot on listening and engagement, and currently our managing partner is doing a load of listening sessions around purpose and what purpose and culture mean to us. We also have engagement service, and we also have performance reviews, which we have to elicit feedback from a range of colleagues. And I just wanted to add to the point of role models, because one thing we found really successful is to use the younger people in our organisation, so current apprentices and trainees, to really help connect and inspire with the young people who have touch points through our Working with Schools programmes, and also encourage our people to get involved as volunteers, as either coaches or mentors. And we do that through a variety of community partners and programmes. So yeah, that absolutely resonates and works well.
Yeah, work experience is coming up there pretty strong. I know we've touched on that. There were a few people actually who mentioned about, we were talking about virtual work experience, but obviously that involves the capability to have digital access. And Joe, is that, actually, let me ask Mark, given you're in the digital skills arena, how do you marry up the people who perhaps, don't have the capability, they don't have a laptop, if they're not rich enough, I guess, to have the money to have a phone and to connect? Mark, what do you do on that front?
Well, I think certainly there should have been a big leap forward in the last 12 months with all of the government funding for laptops and apprentice and things. So schools should certainly, and colleges should now, be in a much better position to equip learners with the hardware that they need to access remote opportunities like remote work experience. Also, while it may be harder in terms of they need access to systems and remote access to systems, employers don't have to deal with the safeguarding issues in the same way. So there's a pluses and minuses there. I think most employers these days can provide different levels of digital access, which means work experience students wouldn't be allowed near anything that sensitive materials, things that could get them in trouble. And therefore it should offer much greater opportunities. I would say it's not the same as a full-blown in-person work experience, but for a young person it's a good start, and more employers should be encouraged to think about the right types of remote opportunities that they can offer, and I think particularly they can be around digital marketing, social media campaigns, starting to engage with legacy code bases. Those sorts of things are fairly easy remote digital work experiences that could be facilitated.
Yeah. Elle, you've got another question for us?
Yeah, right, Steph. So let me just move us on to the next slide. And so here we just wanted to do another temperature check, kind of given everything that we've heard so far in this great session, our panelists, young people, and if we did manage to accomplish the change kind of you all mentioned in your previous slide, how positive would you all be feeling? And Steph, I'll leave that with you to reflect on there.
Okay. So if between us we manage to get things how they should be.
No pressure.
Yeah, I know. How positive would you feel about young people's employability? Yeah, so obviously edging towards extremely possible. I think there's always going to be things that are going to be hurdles, aren't they? No matter which is the preferred option of doing things, there'll always be hurdles. But I think the point being that, there are lots of great ideas being shared here, and so many we haven't even talked about, but brilliantly going on in the chat. And I know Edge Foundation are going to make sure you'll be able to get hold of all of this information after the event as well. Neil, do you want to give us your thoughts then on what we're seeing now from people in terms of managing this?
I think what's interesting is that I think whatever obstacles you put in young people's way, they'll find a way through it. They're very adaptable. And you look at some of the backgrounds they've come from and the problems they've dealt with, actually getting into work, actually sometimes it's a refreshing change for them, gives them the opportunity to express themselves, and you see them develop and flower. And I think more and more employers, when they get to employ young people, the rewards that you get and the positivity you see and what they achieve, it's just the start of a journey. the transition from school to work is the start of a journey that just has never ended, that you'll have to retrain so many times in your career. I started as an engineer, ended up running the company with 1,000 other jobs to do that I didn't have a clue how to do: marketing, HR, finance, but you have to learn it. And I think that's what we need: adaptable people that want to get on, that want to strive. And I see that so much in our younger generation these days.
Yeah, and obviously everyone who is attending this event are people who are already making a difference, or certainly want to, if they're not managing it quite yet. And that's the thing, there are lots of people. It's just more, how do we get this to be a cross nations thing that means every young person has the same chance, and it's not just so patchy as we've already talked about. Shall we bring in the other Eleanor now to see what visual minutes she's managed to come up with? I always love seeing these. And go on, Eleanor, tell us.
Hi, everyone. Right, bear with me. I'm sweating. I've just got to get this on screen. Just bear with me a minute. Okay, share screen. Okay, I don't know if you can see this. Hopefully you can.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah. So.
You want to talk us through a bit of it then?
Yeah, I've done a lovely picture of you there.
That's always the first thing I look at on these. I'm like, how's it drawn me?
Yeah, just talking about your passion, young people, how you had, those links in your day, working with supply chains. And we went on to the panel on what skills employers are looking for. So sort of did that at the bottom there, and then adding to that as well as the conversation goes through. And then this section sort of looking at the films and taking the key messages out of that. Things like the the ingredients I'm going to put by there. And then, yeah, I'll probably sum up a few things. It does sort of, sort of step back a little bit with the time. So I'm catching up with that. But yeah, hopefully we can see it afterwards. We can send it out to you. You can have a look.
Yeah, it's always a brilliant summary, isn't it? Just to see it visually like that. And I know people are popping up on the chat saying it's brilliant as well. So thank you very much for that. And as I said, we'll make sure that's available for everyone to have a look at. So I'm conscious of time. We've got a couple of minutes left now. Should we just have a kind of conclusion from each of you? And just, with these events, you always feel like you want to walk away or turn your laptop away now these days, and just feel empowered, feel like, there's a purpose to it and it's not just us all waffling. So do you want to start, Jo, on what you want people to take away from this?
Oh wow, you've thrown me in there, right? Yeah, I guess I mean, the first thing I'd say is that I do feel quietly optimistic about the future. I think, again, I would echo kind of what Neil had just mentioned, that young people are resilient and they do bounce back. I think that the last 18 months or so in particular has really shown us that, and I do think that we were moving in the right direction when it came to kind of equipping our young people to be wonderful civic-minded members of society as they grew up, whether that's through active citizenship or careers, and that actually what we've got to see is that there are possibilities in this new world, rather than just kind of the lost hope that we feel like, and that lost learning and the negative way of looking at it that's maybe been kind of in the media too much. I think that actually we're in a position now where things can't ever be quite the same. We've got 2 cohorts of young people at GCSE and A level who will just not have exam results on their CV, and what their CV is going to look like in 10, 20, 30 years time. Something's got to change, and I think that we're in a place where that change could be really positive. And yeah, I feel quietly optimistic.
That's a really interesting point, Jo, just about how this year is so different for everyone. And we've seen companies having to suddenly change overnight the way they work, as well as young people. So all of this just shows actually you can reset things, you can change quickly. It doesn't need 7 years of analysis and things like that. We can change things. Kirsty, what are your thoughts on that then? Kind of closing summary from you.
Yeah, I think, you know, it's just fantastic to see everyone who's involved, but it's really important not to keep pushing and keep pushing for improvement and pushing for change, because we're not at that 8.1 or certainly not that 10 yet. So let's not lose the passion and the drive.
Yeah. Neil?
I think when I reflect, I think we started our apprenticeship scheme in 2009, around the lost generation back then. And what I'm seeing is now that those apprentices that we took on all those years ago are becoming leaders in our business, are becoming really instrumental and key in developing our business for the future. So what I'd say is always give them the chance, give young people that chance, and they'll pay you back, never ending. So, you know, I can't speak, take on an apprentice, guide a young person, and the rewards are fantastic, both for you and them.
Mark?
I think also cautiously optimistic. When I was setting up the college 6 years or so ago, if I look at the amount of change that's happened in that time already, I think there has been a significant change already. I think the pandemic will speed that up. I think, you know, universities have come out of the pandemic looking pretty poor in many ways, to be honest, and that value for money proposition of university is being questioned, I think, more than ever, and that, you know, I think is a really good thing. I think universities have got a lot of improvements to make, and I think it's great that there's, you know, degree apprenticeships and other types of higher level and aspirational apprenticeships coming along, and I think, you know, the more schools can start to wake up to those opportunities and promote them actively to young people, the better.
Yeah, Ollie, final word from you.
Yeah, I mean, I think the degree of consensus amongst young people, employers, parents, teachers about the future of education is remarkable. They want this breadth. They want to be preparing these well-rounded young people. I think the momentum is now unstoppable, and it's time for politicians of all hues to come behind that and make sure the system is supporting teachers and young people to do that, rather than kind of them doing it in spite of the system.
Yeah, yeah. Really good point to end it on. So it's been brilliant to hear everyone's thoughts on it, and again, the chat, just great for hearing about all the different projects going on that everyone's involved in, and that, you know, it's worth having a look at all those, especially if you're someone who's thinking about how do I take, you know, do an apprenticeship, or you're thinking how do I partner with a business or whatever else. It's really worth having a look at all of that. And yeah, good luck is what I'll say. I'll keep trying to do my bit by talking about it on the telly and stalking Gavin Williamson, although see how long before that might change. And yeah, just keep doing what you're doing, because, you know, I know it's tough at the moment, but thankfully you guys are the ones who are actually powering us through more than you probably realise. So thank you very much. And I should say as well, on behalf of the Edge Foundation and of course Envision, thank you to all my panelists who've been part of this, and to the two Eleanors, for Eleanor Wilson for, of course, doing all those great polls for us, and Eleanor B for the fantastic visual representation, which will get sent out. Thanks to Ollie, Neil, Joe, Kirsty and Mark for their inputs into all of this from all their different perspectives. If you did enjoy this, which I hope you did, you can visit the websites to get more details, so edge.co.uk and also envision.org.uk. You can get updates, join the community if you're not already part of it. But thank you very much, and have a nice life until I see you next.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.